Thanks for tuning into the podcast today. We are going to be talking about globalism today and the origins of it. It's a word that we keep hearing in the news all the time now, globalism, and it seems to be a little confusing if you don't know much about it. We're going to unpack that. We're going to talk about the origins of it, which might surprise you because it actually goes back literally thousands of years. So it's going to be a good podcast. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy the podcast.
You're listening to the All Out War podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of All Out War. I am Turner. I love that intro. It just gets me excited every time. I love it. I look forward to it every week. I am here in the studio with Rosie. What's up, Rosie?
What's up, man?
How you doing?
Good. Hey, did you know that Sammy Davis Jr. was also a Satanist? And he attended a lot of parties until he converted to Judaism. But at his shows, even after, he would save seats for Anton LaVey.
Wow, really?
Yep.
I did not know that.
That's what I read.
Dude, I just love it. Every week. That's amazing.
Read that on Mother Jones. Yeah.
Well, man, we are in the studio this week. Rosie's here. Cody is not with us, unfortunately. He's dealing with some family stuff with a sick kid. This is what it happens when you have kids, man. You got to take care of them. But he will be with us again next week. And we have a guest in the studio this week with us, Jonsey. What's up, Jonsey? How you doing,
G'day,
man?
mate. Whatever.
Hey, I love that accent.
It's late. We're all giddy.
Is that an Australian that showed up? Oh, man. Speaking of Australian, I just want to make a couple quick announcements before we jump into the podcast. Number one, we are now we are now on YouTube. So you can go to All Out War Podcast on YouTube. And we will be posting every week. We'll be posting our podcasts on there, so you can listen on YouTube as well. Still on SoundCloud, which we've always been on. We've applied for iTunes. They're reviewing our podcast. Hopefully, they will approve our podcast. But you never know with them, right?
Yeah, we're not holding our breath.
Yeah, but listen, even if they don't get us on iTunes, we're still having a reach in our audience because I was checking our SoundCloud stats. We have listeners, 66 listeners from the Netherlands have listened to the podcast, 2 from the United Kingdom, and 2 from Australia, and 2 from Saudi Arabia.
Crazy.
We are reaching people all around the world from this silly little podcast that we've been doing, and I'm just so excited about that. And I just want to say, if you're listening from the UK, Australia, Croatia, we also had some wherever you're listening from, thank you. And if you enjoy the podcast, just share what you enjoy about it with someone else, and let somebody else enjoy the podcast as well. Because listen, we love what we're doing, and if we can bless you, then it makes us happy.
And if you don't like the podcast, let us know why.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
Yeah,
we're big boys. We can.
It makes us happy.
Yeah, I mean, if you leave a bad enough comment, you might even make it onto the podcast. We might even read it on the air here because we're like that. We like to make ourselves feel bad. Anyways, so we have a great episode this week. We're going to be talking about some cool stuff. Last week, we had a podcast on conspiracies, and it seemed to strike a pretty good nerve. A lot of people really enjoyed that podcast, and I got good positive feedback from that as well. But we're going to kind of tag on to that for a kind of a pseudo part 2 of that. And we're going to be talking about some more of the origins of kind of where things in the whole of humanity started to just go weird, and what caused those things, and how things are getting made right. But just an awareness of things that have happened literally thousands of years ago, and they're still affecting us today. And so I think that this is kind of cool to talk about and look at. It's something that I've enjoyed studying over the years. And if so I'm going to be basing this right off the bat on the Bible. So I'm going to be opening up my Bible. I'm going to be reading from the Bible. Actually, Stephen, if you want to read it, I think you're already there. I'm not there. Are you at Genesis chapter 6?
Oh yeah.
All right, just read through, part of that real quick, and then I'll kind of explain what I'm coming at.
Sorry, I have it as the King James version.
Oh, the old King James.
You gotta do it with an accent.
Thou art thou howenbout.
Okay. So Genesis 6, when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord.
Awesome. So just a review quick on that verse. So what's happened is Adam and Eve populated the earth. The population of the earth are estimated at this time is actually close to 1 billion people or more. It's crazy. I saw some cool research. They did math on just the way that population and length of life was recorded in the Bible at this time, because the length of life was much longer early on in history of man, and they said with that length of life and how many children they could have, the population would have exploded pretty quickly. And the environment was conducive to that as well, because we had a really pure environment at this time as well. Like, the water was so much cleaner. You could drink it probably from nearly any place on the planet. So there's no pollution. All of those type of things were just conducive to quick growth, explosive growth. And that makes sense because God designed it that way, right? But so then you get to the point of Genesis chapter 6 here, and God is regretting that he even made mankind, which it's hard to read that, knowing that God's a God of love. I take solace in the fact that it says that it hurt him to his heart. In fact, the version you're reading, the ESV, Stephen, mine actually says in verse 6 of Genesis 6, it says, the Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. And I have a little note there that filled with pain is actually the word for depth of grieving to moaning. So I think there's some Hebrew wording in there that I probably unpacked and just wrote in there, but depth of grieving of moaning. So that's a pretty sorrowful act that God was doing. But I think when you start to look at those verses of what was happening previous to that, it shows that God really we tied his hands. And so this is where, Kevin, I love that you're here, because this is something you love talking about, and well, go ahead. So it goes back to this word Nephilim.
Right.
So this is the key word in 6. It's kind of a mysterious word in the Bible. It's alluded to not only in Genesis 6, but it's talked about again in the book of Chronicles and Kings, because we have an encounter with a Nephilim with David and Goliath. And then there's also in Kings another mention of a guy named Og, the king of Og. And then we have this allusion to the references that are explained in sources outside of the Bible through places like the book of Enoch, which are not canon in Scripture, but they're referred to from Scripture because Jude in the New Testament refers to the book of Enoch.
Yeah, they're used for historical references.
Yeah, so Enoch,
a little bit more detail.
I kind of wish we had some like ancient transcripts of Enoch that were reliable so that it could be included in the canon of Scripture, because I've read Enoch and it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's ancient text. It's probably would be considered the oldest text. Now, what I read, this is the thing, is it's not canon of Bible in the sense that, so this is the thing about Enoch. You have to be careful about if you've read the book of Enoch and you decide to go look at it after hearing this podcast. It's not canon of Scripture because we don't have reliable source text that would verify what's being written in there. And so that's, everything else in the Bible, we have reliable source text. That's one of the reasons it's called canon. And so we can use it that way. That's one of the criteria that we have for putting the Bible together the way it is. But Enoch, we don't. So what you're looking at is best case thing. A lot of ancient writings, but they're not ancient to the point, because you got to understand Enoch was mentioned pretty early on. He dies right before the flood. So Genesis 5.
How far was he removed from Adam?
He was alive when Adam was alive.
Well, yeah, so they all have firsthand knowledge.
So he would have had firsthand knowledge of the account of creation.
Hey, Grandpa, what happened here? Yeah,
yeah, no, for real, yeah. And so you have that, and even Noah was Noah's great grandfather was his grandfather was Adam's dad. Or Adam's son.
Adam's daddy.
Adam's dad was God. I don't know. I'm getting confused. It's late. You're right. But no, for real. So Noah would have been able to have an account, a firsthand account as well, and then he would have.
Well, he saw it, right? The days before Noah, he watched it all happen.
He watched it all happen. Yeah.
So I'll preface this and say
the Nephilim is
the Nephilim. Yeah. So I apologize because I might be a little vague on the details. Being a man of age, not like Noah, but having some timers, I'm not going to recall all the details.
Some timers.
Where am I? What? What? Is there still a Kmart? And then what happens? Every time I play a sport, I have surgery, and surgery results in me on the internet with Percocet at home for 2 days. So I find all these great little nuggets of information on the internet. So my start of this was not really chronological, but I just stumbled across, and because I'm not going to give you the details just as yet because I haven't researched it in the last week or so, but I will give some of my sources that I fell onto, and these are men that have studied this stuff for 20, 30 years, and then can corroborate with documentation, their sources of information. I kind of discovered Marzulli. He's a pastor out in California, and he did a lot of research and was finding all sorts of archived information on giants in North America, and you can go back probably 100, 120 years. And you can, like in microfiche in some of the libraries, look at some of these old Tribune papers and see an Indian burial ground that was dug up, and there's two gentlemen, 5'7", 5'8", and with a coffin, and there's an 8-foot skeleton inside this coffin.
Wow!
And those pictures are all over the place. And there's another guy, Stephen Quayle. He's documented this in books like the Book of Giants. So there's an awful lot of pictures and references to this and that and the other, But when you go back to Genesis 6, it talks about the sons of man, or the sons of God. That term usually refers to the angels. And so these were angels who left their first estate, who decided that they were going to take up this endeavor, and for whatever purpose, but I'm sure it was contrary to God's will, and then take the daughters of men and produce their own offspring. And the product of that would be these hybrid demonic human beings, the giants, the men of renown, this and that and the other.
So that would be what they would call, what we're labeling here from the Bible, from Genesis 6, is Nephilim.
The Nephilim.
So Nephilim are, when you say sons of God, that was a reference to angels, and daughters of men would be human women. Mm-hmm. So you have these angels that left their place in heaven, as Jude would say. The book of Jude says that they left their place of heaven, of glory.
Descended to Mount Hermon. They
descended, and then they somehow connected with human race. Now, this is confusing because there's a lot of theological debate within the church about, can an angel procreate, and how would all of that work? Because that becomes the issue of sticking point for a lot of people. They say, well, Hebrews says that, or I'm sorry, Hebrews talks about angels, says that you may entertain angels unaware. So we know that they can take human form at some level. We know that would be a logical jump from that because of that verse. And
there's several scriptures, or passages that refer to that. With Sodom, the angels there, the men,
they look like men,
right? Yes,
because they wanted to rape them.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's what they did.
No, I know.
Quite disturbing.
I mean, what kind of to want to rape it? I mean, it must have been a pretty handsome angel.
Yeah,
but at the same time, it's an angel. Like
Right.
that thing's got some power. You don't want to get on.
Were
its
they
bad
aware
side.
of it was an angel? I mean, they just looked like a human.
Good point. Good
so,
point. Yeah.
I mean, if you entertain them and not aware,
Right.
then I don't think they pop down with wings on their back. Like,
Right. Like, so then the rub becomes the sticking point in the rub. Like these innuendos I'm making here. They can't procreate. Like, can they procreate or?
well,
Because
but then it says they left their first estate. So are they out of the angelic realm? And who knows what that means specifically? There's a lot of, guessing in there.
Yeah.
Just kind of like the
lot of
fuzzy-haired
unknown.
guy on Ancient Aliens. It's just
the fuzzy hair guy.
what if? What must be a fact then? Right. But we'll.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknown, and
go
we're
that
gonna.
route,
We
but-
should probably make that as a disclaimer for this podcast. There's a lot of unknown
And a lot of debate too.
and a lot of debate, but
some people will say they'll go the Sethite route, where they'll say that the daughters of men were, I guess this I can't recall this, but they weren't fallen angels. They were the offspring of Seth, and
because he was the rebellious one.
right, and
Yeah.
so but
He was it was Seth was the third child born.
Yeah.
because you had Cain, Abel, then Seth. Yeah,
right.
So
And there's a debate. Well, Chuck Missler's a good source for this too. He'll explain all this stuff in detail.
So Chuck Missler, L.A. Marzulli, Stephen Quayle.
Right.
these
They
guys.
kind of
Yeah.
go through all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, if in the big picture, if you look at, there's a war going on in heaven, and God is the all-powerful. He is the creator. He's created everything. What recourse does the devil have? Really none, other than he's here and he's free. And so his main mission is that if he can stop any one of God's promises, he assumes that God's fallible. And he's never been able to do that, but he always continues to try. And so
To make God a liar.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's certain promises. I mean, there's 2,000 prophecies in the Bible, and they've all come true. What are the odds in that? It's miraculous in and of itself. And a lot of these prophecies have been corroborated historically, and they're factual. So this defiling of the human race and trying to destroy God's creation, because if he can't destroy it, he always tries to pervert it. When you go back to the book of Enoch, it says that these fallen angels taught men warfare and advanced technologies and all sorts of perversion, husbandry. They were mixing animals. And then it's kind of strange today because now we've got CRISPR-9 and all this eugenics, and we're mixing and matching animals with parts of humans and this and that and the other, and the references like it was the days before Noah.
I actually just saw this morning that there was something that a lung with a pig, human lung that they grew in a pig.
Inside a pig, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for harvesting or what have you.
Yeah.
Kidneys, what have you. But
Are we going back to the days of Noah?
well, what were those days like?
Right.
But
So the idea was just to kind of connect dots here, because you just gave a ton of information,
Okay.
and I'm going to try and help do that for the listener that's not experienced to this stuff. We've talked about it all the time.
Yeah.
So angels fell, they procreated with women somehow, and then they created an offspring called Nephilim. These Nephilim were identified as being giants because they were extremely tall, and some other aspects that you mentioned before.
there's certain characteristics that are consistent throughout history. There's 6 fingers, double rows of teeth, cannibalistic. Just they devoured everything. I mean, how large were they really?
Yeah.
But
Red hair was one thing too. Yeah. Scottish.
it's great. Look at that.
Let's-
Fee fa foo fum. Look at that little guy.
He's
I'll
good.
eat his thumb.
His thumb and have a 7th.
But when I think it was, I think the idea was either to defile the human genome.
So
with
that's where I was going with this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because if I mean the angels, they know God, and they were in that realm, and to rebel against him, what excuse do they have? Humanity, we know God, but we have to choose to know him. But we have redemption. The angels that choose to rebel don't. Everybody has a chance, and this is a life for the choice. And so, and there's a lot of deception to prevent people from choosing. And sometimes there's just all-out warfare. And so...
So basically, those angels and Satan were the very first liberals. Trying to distort and
fib a little bit, and deceive, Well,
for real, man.
Yeah,
no,
deception's everywhere.
That's a great point. Yeah, no, but that's...
I know some conservatives that deceive too. But
we all have that capability, right?
Yeah, they're more globalist.
So let's park on this for a second.
I want to make this point though, like the warfare part of it, destroying the human genome and then flooding the Levant. I mean, at a certain point, if you can prevent, after the fact with Jacob and prevent the Jews from taking over the Promised Land and the Levant, if there's a huge population of these giants and these demonic hybrids all over there preventing them from going in, because the first time they said, hey, we're not going to do that. We're not going to cross the border and go in there and take that land because they're giants. We're like grasshoppers to them and vice versa. And so they wandered for another 40 years, what have you, a second time, we don't want to do that again, right? But if everything's perverse and demonic in nature and vile and just murderous for the most part, evil. I mean, we see there's evil in the world today. Just most people are just blocked from it.
So, but I want to hold on. Okay. I know it's a war thing, but we got to go back because you went ahead now. But we got to go back to the corruption of the human genome. So was the original Genesis 6 when the Nephilim started to corrupt the human race? Was the plan? Was the idea of the plan of Satan to corrupt the human race so much so that they could not be redeemed because they would be commingled with this hybrid race of?
Well, and again, for historical purposes, if you go back to Enoch, the parents of these Nephilim petitioned God, like, will they have a chance for redemption? And the answer is no.
So they knew that.
So they knew that. God,
so according to the book of Enoch, he knew that there was an unredeemable race of people or of weird.
This hybrid
humans.
Demonic, human.
Yeah. So they were unable to be redeemed because they had that part of them that was the spiritual side of them that was. So
it was demonic in nature. And
so
evil.
This is what a lot of people don't understand about humanity today and Christian theology in particular, and I want to just point this out. So man is three parts typically, and this is a very basic overview, and some people would say 7, some people would say 5, but basically your body is soul and a spirit. And so your body is your physical shell of who you are as a human. Your soul is your mind, your thoughts, your ideas,
personality.
Yeah, and your spirit is the part of you that is within you that is eternal, that goes on to live. And so when you are born, on the earth, Jesus referred to this in John 3. He says you must be born of water and of spirit in order to see heaven. So in order to see heaven, there's a part of you that has to be born of water, which is your physical being. That's reference to breaking of
the
water.
Womb.
Water breaks and a baby's born. And then you must be born of spirit, which is only given by birth from God. And so what you're saying is that these ancients in Genesis 6, these Nephilim, these offspring, were corrupted. The spiritual part of them was alive, but it was unredeemable because it wasn't alive from God. It was alive from a fallen creature, an angel and so that was why they were unredeemable.
Correct.
And so that would make sense theologically. So God then says, I've got to wipe the earth. I've got to do a hard restart. We're gonna. Have you tried turning it off and starting it back up? Right. And
if you look back at Noah, he was pure in his generation. So if you look back at the Hebrew, I mean, it can be taken two ways, and I think they're both accurate. But one, was he righteous, more righteous than everyone else? I mean, he wasn't sinless because only Christ was sinless. But he was probably the most righteous man, obviously, at that point. But it also says he was pure in his generation. So does that mean that his bloodline from Adam had not been defiled?
So maybe him and his family,
genetic preservation.
They were the only ones that hadn't been corrupted and that were still alive. Because we know Enoch dies before the flood, so we know he wasn't corrupted.
Right.
So there was probably a handful of people, but maybe when Enoch died, he might have been the last living, uncorrupted human being.
It could be taken both ways.
So that's a crazy thought to think about.
Well, it kind of changes your perspective on everything when you go back and you read the Bible again, Old Testament and New Testament. And when you think about the days before Noah, and you look at where we are now with genetic mutations and all sorts of other crazy technology going on, the elites wanting to live forever, right?
Because
you can't be held accountable if you can live for another 250 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jesus did say, the second coming of the Son of Man will be as it was in the days of Noah.
Yeah.
So here we got these weird parallels where, we were talking about that human lung in a pig, and you were talking about there was some allusion in the book of Enoch to
mixing of animals and husbandry. Yeah.
Is that where we get the idea of like that weird
the centaur and the minotaurs and what have you? Yeah. I think there's some kind of correlation there. It's
yeah. Well, those ideas don't just happen.
No, but
right?
Yeah, and they kind of go through every culture too.
Yeah, they do.
The men of renown, the mighty men of old, the titans, the giants, the godmen. There's a mythological historical case for all these cases.
Right.
But then at this point, it sounds cool, but what evidence do you have of giants and this and that and the other?
In fact, so too, you talk about mythological. So a lot of the Greek mythology, what came out of this, I'm going to get ahead of myself here. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but a lot of the Greek mythology was connected and stemmed back to Babylonian religion. Mm-hmm. The Babylonian from, back, which will end up being in Genesis chapter 11, I believe is what it was, right?
Yeah.
But all right, so you've got fallen angels, corrupting human race, irredeemable. God floods the earth. He wipes out the creation at that point, grieves his heart.
Let me make this point too, because it grieve his heart. But when why would God tell someone to go in and just remove every man, woman, child, animal, from the Levant when you go in to take it over? Well, it seems a little drastic.
So when you
no
say,
one would ever.
Okay, but you're talking about when the people of Israel were traveling after Exodus to become. But I'm talking about still back in Genesis chapter 6. So don't jump ahead on me.
Sorry,
I'm gonna hold you back from that.
Right.
Okay.
Reel me in.
I know you got things to say about it, but so I want to keep the continuous thought. It helps our listeners. So as God destroys the earth, it grieves him, great pain. He doesn't want to do it, but his hands are tied. If the human race is irredeemable, and he only has Noah and his 3 sons to be able to kind of do a hard reset on the planet, that's really what he's left with. And so that's what he does. And so he does a hard reset. Noah and his 3 sons, they get off the ark after being on the ark for 40 days, 40 nights. They're actually on the ark for almost a year. It's like 300 and some days total where they're on the ark, which is, if you can imagine, like I always, when you read the book of Genesis, Noah, the first thing he does, he gets off of the ark, he grows a grapevine, makes wine, and gets drunk. It takes time, but he has PTSD. The dude's got to have PTSD. How can you not? You saw the entire earth get destroyed. Like you saw everyone that
Shocking.
So
you're going to want to have a drink.
You're gonna. I think if it ever warranted a day for a glass of wine would be the day that you get off the ark, right? You've been living with your family on the ark with all the animals. Oh my gosh, it's a good thing we can laugh about it now. It's not a laughing matter. Obviously, it was a horrible moment, but God kept his promise. He wasn't going to leave us without an opportunity for redemption.
Right.
And he loves mankind so much that he was going to preserve this family, start it over, and then we've moved forward a little bit further. Noah's sons leave the ark, they populate the earth. We have what's Genesis 11, the table of, or Genesis 10, the table of nations. So they're kind of going their different ways. And I just want to make this one point. I know I'm doing a lot of talking, and I apologize.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm one of those guys, when it comes to the Bible, I like to explain it out as best I can. So that's just how I am. But there's a great book, if you're listening and you want to check it out. It's called Noah's 3 Sons. And it basically is a scientific kind of angle towards this whole idea that all of the races that we have on the planet today can be traced back to 3 host families. So you would take Noah's son, like even the, like where they went, like the Japanese race, how varied that is from, like, say, African, but genetically, that variance to get those skin tones and that all of that, it doesn't take a whole lot, and it doesn't take a lot to get there. So what's really cool is this book. It kind of tried to explain a little bit of that. Now, it's hard to find. It came through one of a Bible college class that I actually took, and I have it only in digital form. I couldn't even find it in paperback or hardback, so I had to find it like almost like a PDF. So, but no.
Oh, I found it on Amazon.
Did you find it?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. How much is it?
$7.
$7. You should buy it.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, so Noah's 3 sons, and so now the earth is repopulated again. But now it's not necessarily a fallen angel occurrence that is trying to rebel and destroy God's work. Satan is taking a different tactic, and he's trying to maybe do a little bit of a different tactic, and that's what we would call, like, what modern day would be called globalist, because he has this country called Babylon. And it's an area, a region. It would be in what is modern day Iraq. And Babylon is located there, and the king of Babylon is a man by the name of Nimrod, and he could be a man. He could be a second incurgence of these fallen angels, because in the flood, angels don't die, right? They're not.
Yeah, it said they were there, and they were there for times after,
right,
after the flood.
Because it does actually say that in Genesis 6. It says the Nephilim were there and the days following. Mm-hmm. So we know that after the flood they still came, and we know because of, like you mentioned a minute ago, King David, and he fought Goliath, the famous David and Goliath, right? That's a story. And Goliath had 6 fingers, and he was 9 feet tall, I think is what it said. A weaver's staff, whatever a weaver's staff was. I think they were 9 feet long. But anyways, so you've got this Tower of Babel that the people of Babylon begin to build under Nimrod's instruction, and he wants to build a tower to reach God and this ultimate rebellion to God. And so God takes action yet again, and he confuses all of the languages and scatters them across the earth. So now we go from having one community, one language, real easy to disseminate information, and then it's broken down, and everything's changed now, and then God's not going to let them reach them. And so let's talk a little bit about that, the whole Nimrod. And
well, there's another good source for that, or 2 sources. One would be Dr. Michael Lake. He wrote this the book called The Plains of Shinar, and so
cool.
Yeah, they assume, well, these primitive man wanted to reach heaven, so they put a tower on the top of a hill so they could touch the clouds, and thus they could reach heaven. But the plains of Shinar are the plains, right? It's this low point. But what was the purpose in this tower? Was it just to kind of reach the clouds and assume that they could reach heaven? But when you kind of get into the details in the text, it does talk about, the goal was to break into heaven and declare war on God and the angels. And when you talk about Nimrod, it says he also became Geborim. Did you look that up? Because it was almost like he became a godlike man. And so did he have, like, the men of renown or what have you? What did he actually become? Did he have advanced knowledge of certain things to declare war on God? And so it was more of a breach, a rebellion, and not just a bunch of guys shooting arrows up into a cloud and trying to,
right.
Well, we're going to stick an angel with a 4-point. But I mean, there's a lot to that. But what it was also was like the first world government. Everybody was brought together.
There you go. That's why I was leading with the globalists.
Well, so. What's God's intention for man to, have families and populate the earth, and honor Him and serve, serve your neighbor and serve your children and to honor him in all things. But then when you take Nimrod and this first globalist agenda to put everybody together and create rules and to control them.
And he had a false religion.
Baal,
the
right?
The Babylonian religion.
One world government.
Yeah, one world government, false religion.
One world religion.
Yeah, and currency.
And standard currency.
Yeah, and what's crazy about that is Jesus actually mentions the God of prosperity, which was their money, in the New Testament when he says you can either serve God or mammon. Mammon was the actual name for the false god of prosperity from the Babylonian religion. It's a holdover. And we still, the Greek translation of mammon for the New Testament is money. That's why some of your Bibles would say, oh, you can either serve God or money. And we think of it as like, oh, well, I don't want to be this person that is like, greedy and all that. Yet you don't. But there was a much deeper reference that Jesus was making there when he mentions mammon by name, because they had shekels and they had all these other currencies in the New Testament in Jerusalem at that time. He could have said you could either serve God or shekel or God, but he said mammon. He used that word mammon, referencing back to the religion of Babylon. And then you get into the New Testament. One of the things that Jesus is going to abolish in the New Testament when he comes back at his second coming is, according to the New Testament, is that he's going to abolish the religion Babylon. And there's some deep tentacles there in that religion Babylon that go all the way back. And I think it goes Genesis 11. I think it goes back to Genesis 6, where the first fall of these angels came and create this offspring. I think it's all about rebelling against God. That great conspiracy that Satan led at the very beginning. He was the conspirator. He was the one conspired against God and deceived a third of the angels to fall from heaven as well.
Conspire. He had an agenda. People, you say conspiracy theory. Well, it just means an agenda. Everybody has an agenda.
Yeah.
There's a tribe, a nation, or every nation has intelligence apparatus just to see what the other guys are doing. And so, it's because everybody has an agenda, but there's good agendas and bad agendas.
Yeah.
But, Nimrod kind of being the first prototype of a globalist agenda to conspire to control everything. And we've seen that through history after the fact with, all the way up to modern times.
Do you think that, in reference to the Nephilim again, because I love these, I love the idea, the way one of the ways that I came, this is kind of cool, a little side story here. One of the ways that I came to faith was there was a seed planted in me in the second grade. I had a friend, his name was Carl Moley. And Carl, if you're listening, I owe you this. But Carl was a good old Baptist. His family was Baptist, but they were from Germany. And Carl was really tall. And in I would say not second grade, I apologize. It was sixth grade. We were walking home from school, and I jokingly said, man, you're so tall already. How tall are you going to end up being when you grow up, right? And his parents were both tall, I remember. And he goes, I don't know. I said, maybe you're a giant. Like, I was like joking around. He goes, yeah, well, there was giants. And I was like, what? Now, you got to understand, I never was raised in church, never went to church. I was the first person in my family to become a really card-carrying Christian. So what happened is he says to me, yeah, they're in the Bible, and he tells me the story of David and Goliath. Right, so he's like witnessing to me. I don't even know it, and I don't even know if he knew it.
Yeah,
I mean, but so that stuck with me. There was real giants, like for real. That wasn't just some fairy tale or myth that mythology. No, there was real giants, and we have bones that have been. And this is the thing I wanted to talk about it for a minute. Is like 1940s, 1930s. They unearthed some bones.
Well, yeah, and it goes back through history.
Yeah.
You can find it all over the place. And
so we have photographs.
Oh, yeah, you can Google image giants and then see like the old Ohio Tribune newspaper and then this or what have you. These old microfiche images of two guys 5'8" standing beside this coffin with a skeleton in it that's 8-9 feet tall. And so...
How awesome would that be to find, though?
Yeah, and it's wrapped in Native American... tradition in North America.
Yeah.
And so, I think it was Marzulli found this one guy who read this student's paper or what have you, but he he just was looking through like Google Earth, and well, I guess in Massachusetts there's the American Stonehenge, and there's a guide stone that goes out from it. So he drew a line from that circle to that one stone out about 100 yards, and he just draws it across the Atlantic and across the Stonehenge in England, and then he follows that line. It crosses all the way through Europe into Lebanon.
A straight line.
Straight line, yeah, from Massachusetts, and then they carry it on, and then I think Marzulli just drug it over, and it points straight to Mount Hermon in Lebanon. And so his theory was, well, when the Jews were finally took it upon themselves to take over the Levant, what happened to those giants and the Nephilim and those large men that were like grasshoppers in their eyes, right?
Where'd they go?
Well, yeah, they moved north and across the North America and to South America. And and if you go back to Native American tradition too, like the Hopi and the Four Corners, they talk about these Native American burial grounds, but they weren't, the Indians that were buried there. They were like a lot of these giants. And then, it sounds strange. It's kind of weird just talking about it. But then when you see some of the photographs and you go out, there's a guy who was, self-made archaeologist, but he went out in the island of Catalina, and he would dig up all these giant bones, and he took some pictures of them.
Yeah.
And they, I think they took this from Marzulli and put it on the Discovery Channel, but a guy did some 3D measurements because they knew the height of the guy that owned the museum, and they compared that to the bones, and it was sitting in. He uncovered it. It was in the fetal position, but it came out to about 9 feet tall, and so, you can see this all the way down to South America. And there's another guy, Alberino. He grew up in Peru for a little bit, but he did some research down there. They go into all these old museums, and they find these diaries from the conquistadores. And as they're writing about some of their adventures going through South America, they talk about, well, yeah, we found these huge bones, and we just assumed they were the bones of the dinosaurs on this riverbank that had been washed away. And then we turn the corner, and then there's another huge bone, but now it's a skull. And so the hilt of our rapier to the tip was from the eye socket to the back of the skull.
Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, and then when you look up, so
it's like
Spanish,
an arm,
it's
like
36 inches long.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, 36 inches. That's how long is that, and how tall would that?
A skull was 36 inches.
Yeah, that's insane. That's probably a 20, 30 foot giant.
Just huge, yeah.
Yeah, and you sit in some random
in a riverbank.
Yeah, diary.
Oh, right.
From
Conquistador.
From a few hundred years back, talks about all these giant bones that were discovered. But why is it no one talks about it now? Within like 150 years ago, everybody talked about it because
that was
common
thing.
knowledge.
Like I was gonna say, we have these old so what would happen is they would unearth these skeletons, and then they would call the newspaper, and the newspaper would come and take pictures and write an article about it, and then the Smithsonian would come, and then they would take the bones, and then we'd never see them again. They'd never hear of them again. They'd be gone. And so there could be a cover-up from the Smithsonian. Why would there be a cover-up?
That's a conspiracy theory.
That is a conspiracy theory. No, for 100%.
Joking. That would never happen. Not the Smithsonian.
No, right.
Yeah. Indiana Jones was true. No.
Yeah. There's a giant warehouse somewhere in Northern Virginia with all this
with the bones. But but people have requested, hey, my grandfather had this small museum, and he sent this to you. Where is it? Oh, we've lost it. Or we never had it.
So why do you think they cover it up? Like, what's why would they cover that up?
I think because it contradicts their narrative and corroborates the biblical narrative. If you found the ark, well, like, unbelievable, the Bible's true. How many times have you found something in the Middle East or in Israel, especially in the West Bank, that proves that the Philistines weren't an actual tribe because they found a coin with their name on it? Or something like that, or the Hittites, or something else.
Yeah.
And every time they find something that corroborates the biblical narrative, and so you find the ark. It did say that, he was to put, when Noah built the ark, he was supposed to put tar pitch on the inside and the outside. Well, I could speculate, but was it just because God wanted to preserve it, so at one point it would be found, and then again prove the biblical narrative?
Yeah, that would be great.
Well, yeah, and there's another guy too that he went around with all these different. Wrote a book or DVD, and the Sumerian tablets, those scrolls. I think they're in the London Museum, and there's a little narrative about world flood, and it talks about these 8 people on it, right? And that old, because there's only a handful of people that can still read that Sumerian script.
Yeah.
And so the professor that was saying, oh, well, it does talk about that, but it was just a local flood. It wasn't a worldwide flood. And he goes, well, are there any other references on the scrolls that talk about that? He goes, no, but he goes, what's this one? It's got little pictures on it. He goes, well, yeah, but this is just a drawing of the world with the 8 continents with the continents and the oceans. And he goes, so they did have an idea of what the world was if they knew where all the continents were and all the oceans were.
But it was flat. The Earth.
Don't get me started. I don't believe in the flat stuff. But but no, I mean, in his own words, because they said they only knew local, but no, obviously they didn't if they knew.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. Yeah. It's funny to me. It's like all of these different like tribes and stuff. Ancient tribes have a story of a localized flood at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But they're
all over the world.
But they're spread out all over the world. So it was like a bunch of little localized floods, or it was a legit worldwide flood.
Well, the desert, the high desert plains in Peru, and I mean, all over the top of Grand Canyon, there's fossilized sea creatures in the silt that kind of proves that. I mean,
they're finding fish bones and seashells up in mountaintop regions, which shouldn't.
Well, and
be
that's
there.
the controversy, right? I mean, a little bit off topic, but. The variance in years in Darwinism, right? Man did not walk with the dinosaurs, but there's archaeological flats in Texas that show, it's one thing to show, a dinosaur print beside a human print, but then there's another thing when you see a human footprint and a dinosaur's toe going over top of it. Well, but I didn't think they lived together.
Right, yeah. Right? Which one came first?
Wait a minute.
Right,
what was that? So squelch.
Yeah, I think. Well, there are some people that believe that the dinosaurs made it onto the ark. That Noah actually had little. Dinosaurs. We think of them as gigantic. And some of them were really big. But a baby one wouldn't be that way. So if you had a baby brontosaurus
or ones that obviously were in the water.
Right.
Because there's a lot of water ones, or ones that could fly, maybe.
There's another guy. This is intriguing too. He's an old scientist, good Christian guy, Stan Deo, but he had a theory that the Earth used to rotate at a different pace, and so there was less gravitational pull. And at a certain point, when an asteroid hit it, it changed the pace. The gravity was much denser. But how do you explain a huge giant dinosaur, because their bones just can't handle the weight and the musculature for them to move as fast as they did at the time, unless the gravity was much smaller. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah, and so it just, and then it also, it explains the old dates, because if the rotation was at a different pace, if you lived to be 150 years, would you then be living to 500 years? And so, so a lot of things come together if you look at that theory.
Wow.
And I could dunk, I bet.
I thought about that.
I would be able to dunk. Lighter gravity.
No. Well, I'd be a lot taller.
I'd have ups for sure.
At least 6'1".
Right. No doubt. Dude, that's amazing. That's really cool. I always am intrigued by some of that stuff. And you're right. I think the issue is narrative is not being met. And so they have to kind of hide it or keep it from coming out the way that it needs to be exposed. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone, if you ever go to the Museum of Natural History up in DC, Washington DC, I mean, there's an entire section that kind of walks you through evolution. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy to me is that this is Smithsonian made and everything, and they endorse it, they promote it. It's still a theory. But yet they have it there on display as though it's real, and they have these, they try and have
but it's fallen apart.
It's 100%
for so many years.
Yeah,
and I think they thought by now it would be proven, but it's gotten worse for them.
Right.
And so, you look at, there's a big debate. A handful of years ago, this one scientist, she found some congealed membranes inside of a dinosaur. Well, that can't happen because, beyond 4,000 to 5,000 years, it petrifies. Well, what does that mean? Those things should be millions of years old.
Right.
Oh, no, you pour a little water on it, it's kind of spongy. That couldn't have been more than 10,000 years old. Well, that can't be. Science is contradicting science. How does that happen? So
because they took their theory as fact, and
Well, like a lot of things, right?
Right.
So,
but there's so many unknowns to some of these things. But so that's cool, man. So now, we've got we're going to jump back forward now. So now you have the Tower of Babel was established. It was broken down. The language was scattered. There was this first one world government, one world currency, one world religion, all of that, which was, we can, as believers, as Christians, we look at that and say, okay, well, obviously that was inspired and authored by Satan.
Yeah.
But they move forward because God breaks that down with the Tower of Babel. He scatters the language. And so, but now there's just, now God is going to bring forth a nation and bring forth a tribe and then a family and then a Messiah out of that nation. And so now the great conspirators' plan is to prevent that from happening. And so the nation would be Israel. The place would be the Levant that you keep talking about in that area. And we know that when the people of Israel go into Egypt and they stay there for 400 years, they become slaves. They get rescued out by Moses after being in there, and they're 1 million people strong. They're gonna go across the Red Sea. They're gonna go. They should only. It's literally like a 2-day trek, but it ends up being 40 years for them because he's trying to get them to be right with him, which seems to be the theme, right? God, He's always contending with us, but he wants to bring them into a land of their own so that Messiah can come out of, because he had foretold that he would be from a tribe, from a nation, from all of these things. And so
another promise from God that El Diablo wants to break.
Right, yeah. He just wants to cause God to look like a liar. So Joshua takes over after Moses dies, and he's going to lead the people into the promised land. And he's one of the spies that goes over. Joshua, Caleb, they go in, they check out the land, and they say, lo and behold, guess what? The men are giant. We look like grasshoppers. And so, but I don't know if they're cannibals, because they talk about the grapes were the size of men's heads. So that'd be a pretty big grape.
Yeah, well, then again, you're mixing it. I mean,
it could have been technology, huh?
Yeah, genetic manipulation early on, right?
Yeah.
Through advanced knowledge of all things on the earth.
So do you think that the angels that came down from the fallen angels gave them that technology and knowledge and all of that?
Well, I would think so. I mean, you think they'd have advanced technology, because when you look at at Giza and Chichen Itza and all these old ancient structures, yeah, they all line up astrologically to the stars with precision. I mean, you've got a lot of them have been just completely unearthed and destroyed, but they're 50,000-pound stones that came from 2 miles away. I mean, how did they have that type of technology to move that stuff?
Yeah, for real.
It'd be a huge effort on our part to do anything similar. And then you can look at some of the I guess the cornerstones from those they've been built over time and time again, but some of the foundations of some of those old buildings in Peru and South America, I mean, it just looks like huge stones that have been melted like marshmallows and pushed together. I mean, how do you don't carve that, right? What kind of technology do they have to?
Dragons.
Oh yeah,
fire-breathing dragons, melting the stone. No, but so that technology though that they gave would have been even useful for like the genetic stuff too. So what you're saying, so like, not only to build, because obviously there were some weird building. Now here's my take on this. So these angels, right? Jesus makes a statement in the New Testament. He says, where I'm going, you cannot come with me now, but where I'm going, I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I will come back, and I will bring you with me. And he says, I'm going to prepare a place for you. And then some of other versions and another gospel refers to it as, "I'm in my house are many mansions," and we get a glimpse of the construction of what heaven would be like at some level, because John in the book of Revelation, when he's taken up, the streets are gold, and he describes gates and things like that and walls. And so somebody has to build that stuff, right? Somebody has to build it. So the angels are at work. They're God's servants. And so a fallen angel would have technology on how to build, how to move things.
I never thought of that. Yeah.
And it just wouldn't be supernatural. It wouldn't be like, oh, I can like Jedi mind trick that rock to move over there. I think it was like they had hands-on technology that they used, and it's amazing how much God actually does that in our lives all the time, right? You know?
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of goes to the whole thing where you hear all these, like, the Hindus have these old stories about people arriving in flying saucers or, you know, stuff like that, and giving them all these ancient technologies. So it even kind of explains like this narrative that's pushed by like ancient aliens and stuff like that, that, you know, they're looking, secular people are looking at these things and going, humans can't do this alone, right? So it even kind of gives credence to this whole thing.
Like UFOs.
Like basically the Bible already answered it. Like, you know what I mean? Like
it's definitely
totally lines up.
Definitely brushed up against it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's for sure.
But I got to go back and find all that stuff that I used to read back in the day. But there were some other guys that were doing some research on alien abduction, and there's like 10,000 people over so many years, right? It's just an exhaustive study, just too much data to filter through. But they try to look at, well, what are some of the key variances that we can find that aren't common in all of them? And they started looking at faith and religion, and I think they found that 90% of the time someone was abducted, if they just in a panic said the name of Jesus, poof, they were back where they were supposed to be. I mean, how is it that aliens from a different planet know who Jesus is, right? And that's I think they're a little bit more demonic and deceptive in that case.
I believe. I mean, that just makes more sense to me than...
Yeah, you go back through the ages, right? Whether it was in medieval times or what have you, there was always been a name for something that's been unexplained. So whether they were, fairies or syncubuses and succubuses, ghosts, apparitions,
hey, watch
whatever.
Your mouth, man.
What? Or can't. But there's always a name for them, but there's no explanation for them. But I think they're demonic spirits that deceive.
Yeah.
To be whatever they want you to think of them at the time. It's just a good distraction.
Yeah.
So
totally. Yeah. So then the question the question that I'm often asked is, if they did it before the flood, and then they came back and we see giants after the flood with David and Goliath, why aren't we seeing giants now? And could we see giants now? What would you say to that?
No, I don't see why we couldn't, but we just don't. And what is the point? Well, there's a couple theories. I mean, I'm not sure how late you guys want to stay up tonight talking about them, but I know three in general.
Throw a theory out. Yeah, let's talk about it.
There's, and two, I think, is it the angels that were held in lock and chain under in the abyss, waiting for the time to be released in Revelations, which was that, was it 7 or 8? I don't recall, but, they were.
So those were the angels. What about those angels, though?
Well, they were. I mean, are those? Well, I mean, I guess you need to go back and define. You had the fallen angels, who were the angels, and you had the and from what in my best understanding, the Nephilim, the offspring. Those, I think they're the demons. I don't think they really have a place to go. So they're
the ones being held.
Oh, so I'm going to blow your mind right now. So,
all right.
Talking about demons.
Right.
A lot of people believe that demons are fallen angels. That's just a new name for them. That they were angels that were once in heaven. But I heard a theory on this, and it really got me thinking that you have fallen angels that are fallen angels, and they still, Ephesians talks about talks about the power rankings of different levels of of demonic forces, the principalities and powers of the air,
right,
that Ephesians talks about in Ephesians 5. And then the theory I heard was that the demons were actually the disembodied souls of Nephilim that were destroyed at the flood. So you have fallen angels, and then you have demons. And it's not that they necessarily work together either. like in conjunction with one another. So you have demonic possession, oppression, which could be the result of a disembodied spirit of a dead hybrid. And that's why I'd want to kill and be evil and rebel and do all these things.
Because that is its nature.
Yeah, but it probably does have to submit to Satan because of the fact that, well, it submits to God, Jesus. We know that by his name the demons tremble. But
I was going to say that kind of leads to, if go with me on this one. So if you're getting the soul of someone who's 10 feet at minimum height, right? So they varied in, the Nephilim, the giants, varied in heights.
Yeah.
So if you're getting the soul or the mind or the being that in, demonic possession, they always say that they have superhuman strength and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So maybe, if they have this
there's something to that for sure. Yeah.
Soul of this 12 foot tall guy that's built for war.
As someone who's been, around a lot of crazy spiritual things, I can attest that just from my own experience that demonic possession is true. It is real. I mean, I've encountered it, personally. So
Case, was it Cleveland a couple years ago? The mother called the police because her child was possessed, right? They get this stuff all the time, but this is the one case where 2 police officers documented the child walking up a wall or crawling up a wall, and that's not natural.
No, that's
so,
that's defying laws of physics,
foul.
right?
Yeah. So
party foul.
Party foul. I'm out.
Yeah, taser.
I saw us leave stand taser.
Right, but yeah, so you have the possibility of this complete rebellion that's unseen, but driving forces. It's creating. And it wants to do this ultimate rebellion of a recreated one world government, recreated one world religion, recreated one world currency, because we know that mammon is what people need. Money does make the world go round in that sense.
It's a form of control.
Yeah, it's a form of control. That's right. And so you have all of those things working together, and they're working together to bring us back to that place once again. That's what's so crazy to think about. And so when you have these globalists that right now, so now you're going to, we're current day now, globalists are working to bring all of this back into play, and they're being motivated, maybe unwittingly, some of them are Satanists. There's a huge number of Satanists, as the opening of the podcast we learned, Sammy Davis Jr., Liberace. There's a huge number of Satanists that want that to happen. They want that to be the case. And so that's kind of working, and it's coming about in its own way, in its own style, and it's motivated by these forces that we see threaded through the Bible, from the book of Genesis all the way through to the end in Revelation. How crazy is that to think about?
Yeah. Well, whether you go back to the Third Reich, the 1,000-year reign, another globalist attempt by the Germans, and all the research that they did. A lot of those German scientists were heavily involved in the occult. They go back, the Aryan race, going back to what they would want as the advanced knowledge in times of Atlantis. And then, communism, another globalist form of government, and Islam as well. They have a globalist agenda.
Yeah.
And then you talk about whether some of them were knowledgeable or not. You've got several of these groups. Trilateral Commission,
well, I was going to say, just real quick, even Muhammad, when he was revealing when he was getting the revelations, to use the term, from the angel to write, or was it Gabriel?
It was Gabriel.
That's what he said. But but there's also this theory. What's his name? He wrote the Satanic Verses.
Anton LaVey.
No. He wrote a book called I can't remember his name, but he's not allowed. He has a
Simon Rushdie.
Rushdie, yeah.
Rushdie, yeah.
He has the hit on him. But basically, there's this theory, and I think he popularized it in kind of like a Da Vinci Code way of the that actually the Gabriel, so to speak, was actually he was being deceived by Satan or a fallen angel when he got these verses or certain verses.
Well, wasn't that the first
Quran.
impression he had? They talked to his wife,
Right, and she was like, no,
this is good.
Like, it's
Go
good.
with it.
Go with
you
it.
know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good thing.
So you could say arguably one of the biggest world religions is exactly he got.
Well, they
came
refer
straight
to
from Satan himself.
They refer to Allah as the great destroyer and the great liar. What do we refer to as the great destroyer and the great liar in the Bible?
Right. Yeah. Satan. Right.
Yeah. So
yeah. But what's interesting though about that with Islam too is it's labeled a religion of peace, but it's by force.
Right.
So
well, that's what I always say is if you look at the, I always like saying if so if Islam is a religion of peace, why aren't Islamic extremists extremely peaceful, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
You know, like you have the Taoists and all these things.
Well, Christians turn the other cheek.
Right. What is an extreme Christian is the one who like donates all his wealth and goes to Africa to go live and
he lives
help people
selflessly, right?
Yeah. Denies him completely himself and
it's so true,
tries to live for Christ. But
there's a stark. I mean, I think we're all. You have a worldview, which is your belief, which, for some it's a religion. Right? So what do you believe? And then most of it's defined by a document. So if you're defined as a Christian by the Bible, Jesus simplified it and said, if you love God with all your heart and you serve your neighbor as yourself, that is the life that you're supposed to live. Yeah. Where you're defined by the Quran. It's not about freedom. I mean, God loves us. He gave us freedom to love him back. It has to be reciprocal. Right. So, and it's a, time to choose. We're created in his image. So we have the same desires. So when you have a family, there's nothing better than when your children love you back. If you have a child that goes a little sideways, you do everything you can to bring him back. But you also want to teach him and guide him, hey, don't stick your finger in the light socket. There's rules. Some people see those rules or those commandments as, I'm being restricted. There's no freedom in Christianity, but there is, because you always have the choice to choose. But in some religions, there is no choice, and in some religions, it's just not compatible with the Constitution, which is based off of freedom. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, man, that's crazy. So it's a huge, that's a lot of conspiracy.
Did you guys ever hear about what Albert Pike and his letter to his compatriot? Yeah. So
break it down. You break it down.
You mean break it down?
Yeah.
All right. Correct me if I get some of the details wrong. But
right.
I mean, I think he was an old Confederate general.
Yep.
And in the Illuminati or what have you, whatever their name was at the time, and I guess a letter back and forth. They were talking about their globalist agenda for a final one world order.
And just to preface this, he was a known occultist.
Yes,
and he was open about it. And we still do have a statue of him.
Well, we'll talk about some of the known, in D.C., yeah.
But, go ahead, so the letter.
Oh, yeah, but the letter, it talks about, there's going to be, to get to this point, 3 world wars. And the first one, and this is, I think he wrote this, in the early part of the 19th.
Right before he died, yeah.
Yeah, so like 1900 or what have you.
Yeah.
Or 1890s. But the First World War will be just to remove the Tsarist families from Russia. And the second one is to remove as many as the fascists and Christians from Europe as we can. And in the Third World War, after we establish the state of Israel, we're gonna use Islam against all the other religions. And at that point, when people have had enough of governments and religion, they'll be clamoring for one world government and one world religion and one world currency because of the currency wars and what have you. And how much prognostication was in that statement. So and you go through history, and there's always been some type of agenda for some kind of global control over everything. Mm-hmm. And when you follow some of the guys that were in the occult, was it Aldous Huxley? Do you remember him?
Aldous Huxley, the author.
He was and his brother. What was his name? I thought, didn't he start UNESCO and Lucis Trust and then the UN? I'll go back and do some more research on that.
I don't know him, but I know Dr. Huxtable.
Well, let's not get into that. That's a different podcast.
Yeah, I mean, Albert Pike, that guy was... I'm going to read some quotes. I just found them on the internet real quick while you guys are talking. Listen to some of the quotes that Albert Pike had. He says, famous one, "The sovereignty of oneself over oneself is called liberty." I mean, these all sound really good. "A war of great principle ennobles a nation." Ennobles a nation. It's a philosophy is a kind of journey, ever learning yet never arriving at the ideal perfection of truth. So you see these like wise statements, but still kind of laced in there it's like partial.
Do what thou will.
Partial truth, right?
Which is which was Anton LaVey's satanic creed. Right.
Do as thou wilt.
Yeah.
To do your own will, basically. And then another one, Albert Pike, "Faith begins where reason sinks exhausted." And I would say that actually isn't even biblical, because faith is reasonable. We have a reasonable faith, right? As believers, as Christians, where our faith is in a person, Jesus. And there's no a whole lot of mystery about that. It's not like my reason is exhausted at that point. I'm actually encouraged,
Yeah. Well, we have hope.
We have hope, right?
And peace and contentment.
Yeah.
And it's just a desire to share that with everyone.
Yeah. Yep. Well, man, this has been awesome podcast. I think we've covered a lot of ground here today. We went from Genesis 6 to Revelation, the end of Revelation.
You rabbit trailed like crazy.
We did. No, we actually did a little bit of rabbit trail, but pretty solid case through. I mean, so, you can see where the beginning rebellion from Satan goes in to destroy the human race, mankind, and then set up an ultimate rebellion against God that courses itself through history in many ways. And the globalist, one world, one religion, one currency is the theme that he established. And
he basically gave the blueprint early on as to modern day globalism. So maybe we'll have to get into that next time. How move from the past now that we have a history about it. Yeah, and see how it.
I think the whole idea of globalists and Illuminati and all of that too is something that we should unpack at another time, because a lot of people don't even understand it. It's like Illuminati is actually trendy right now, and people don't even understand. I mean, I saw a Taco Bell commercial that was kind of mocking the Illuminati.
But it's well documented.
Oh yeah, it's documented, but a lot of people don't know it. You just gotta research it, find it, and look it up.
Well, you can do a cast on mass deception and mind control.
Oh yeah.
We started mind control in our last podcast, the MK Ultra and stuff, which I called mind control MK, but it's actually Monarch.
It's a butterfly.
I made a stupid. Anyways, but look, Kevin, man, it's been awesome having you.
It's always fun.
Yeah, it's cool, and we'll have you on again sometime if you want to come back on, and we'll continue this. There's so much about these things, and it's just fun to talk about, and it's interesting, and I just want to encourage. Again, the verse that I read last week, and Jesus said this himself, and it's a great verse for us to end on. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You've gotta come against the lies, and you've got to embrace the truth if you want to.
You got to read your Bible.
You got to read. That's right, man.
You got to find the truth and seek it.
Find it, yeah. And he says, if you look for me with all of your heart, you will find me. And so. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man can come to the Father except through me. And I don't think there's a better verse to end on. So thanks, guys. Amen. Rosie, it was good hanging with you again, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was pretty silent on this, but I was just taking it all in. There's so much.
I know. I'm a blabbermouth.
Awesome. No, I learned a lot sitting here. So
it was fun. It was fun. Jonsey, thanks, brother.
Thanks, brother.
We'll catch you next time. And all of you guys listening, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the All Out War podcast today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to know more, you can visit us on the web at alloutwar.us, or you can find us on Twitter at alloutwarcast. Hey, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.